Support comes from BECU, a member-owned credit union putting people over profit, offering financial services and support to the community with access to local financial centers, over 30,000 ATMs, and online resources at becu.org. Federally insured by NCUA.
Hey, it's Patricia Murphy. It's Wednesday. This is Seattle Now. Vaccines are beginning to help us get back to a new normal. And right now, after making it this far, many small business owners are trying to figure out what normal will look like. In a minute, KUOW's Joshua McNichols tells us what two local businesses say they need to survive. But first, let's get you caught up. School directors want Governor Inslee to relax social distancing requirements in the classroom. This as an April 5th deadline to offer some in-person instruction approaches. A letter from the Washington State School Directors Association this week urges the governor to adopt new CDC guidelines that say 3 feet between students is acceptable. The letter says 6-foot distancing will make reopening nearly impossible. Oregon has already made the change. A 30-year-old Auburn man pled not guilty yesterday to federal charges stemming from the January 6th riot at the U.S. Capitol. Government prosecutors say Ethan Nordine was near the front of the crowd that stormed the Capitol building. He's charged with destruction of government property, obstruction of law enforcement during civil disorder, and conspiracy. Nordine is a self-described sergeant of arms for the Seattle branch of the extremist Proud Boys group. His next court date is set for April. And bad credit? No problem, at least when it comes to your insurance rate. Washington State's insurance commissioner has barred insurers from using credit scores to set rates for personal property. The emergency rule extends for 3 years after the coronavirus pandemic is declared over. It comes after a bill that would have permanently banned the practice stalled in the legislature. When there's a natural disaster, the emergency response is important, but the months afterward, arguably, have a bigger impact. That's when we rebuild, and people start putting their lives back together. We're almost through the emergency part of the COVID pandemic, and now we're starting to think about what recovery looks like. KUOW's Joshua McNichols is out and about visiting small businesses in a few cities around the Puget Sound to hear what they need to recover from the crisis. Hey, Joshua.
Hey, Trish. And I feel like I need to knock on wood when you say we're almost through it because...
Oh, I know.
I know. Who knows what could happen, right? But there is optimism out there. You feel it. You feel it for sure.
Joshua, you visited a few different cities and talked with a bunch of business owners. Were there any themes that stood out to you in what people were saying about how they're doing?
One thing that I heard differently in different places where I went is how they're feeling supported or not supported by the sort of government response, you know. And in Seattle, I was much more likely to hear people saying they were not feeling that support. You know, I spoke to Kelly Faw, who's the owner of Dry Goods Design, and she told me, you know, whatever we're doing as a city, it's not working. I mean, Seattle used to have 350,000 office workers downtown. They're gone. You know, there's only like 15% of them going into the office now. And Pamela Banks, who's managing the city's economic recovery, says by the end of the year, maybe only 100,000. That's like less than a third of those commuters will be back. So Kelly Faw, the owner of Dry Goods Design, says like she's just not seeing customers who used to walk by her store.
I mean, right now, like if this was, you know, a year and a month ago, right? This would be not full, but you would be seeing people pass by every 3 to 4 seconds, whether or not they were going to meetings or going down and getting coffee. So just not having these upstairs neighbors is truly, truly a huge impact.
You know, people would walk by and be, I always wanted to take a sewing class or some kind of a crafting class. I guess I'll pop in and sign up. Those walk-bys aren't happening anymore. And so she's down to like open by appointment only. She's had to lay off her staff, and it's just her kicking around alone inside, basically bleeding money. You know, she's lost $200,000
wow.
on on this pandemic. And she does not feel like the city has been supportive of small business in the way she needs it to, because with those commuters gone, there's sort of a vacuum of activity in downtown Seattle and in Pioneer Square. And in that vacuum, many business owners tell me they feel they're really worried about public safety, and their customers are worried about public safety. And that is keeping them from coming in.
Joshua, it remains to be seen what downtown will look like even a year from now, right? It is unlikely we'll go back to the office in the same way that we were. So that leaves business owners like Kelly in this situation where the future is uncertain. What does she want the city to do?
She needs the city to figure out a way to bring more people to downtown, to Pioneer Square, and she needs the city to take seriously her public safety concerns so that people feel safe coming down. In the past, the way that the city has dealt with the sort of public safety concerns has been bring a lot of people in. And when you have lots of people there, people feel safer, right? Some of the city's strategies involve, like, in the future, could we turn the old Macy's building into like an art space or a business incubator? Or will sidewalk cafes be the thing that will bring people down? What other things will the business community ask us as a city to do? And so Seattle is in this, like, we're asking questions phase where they're trying to hear from the business community what they want. And yet when I went to Kent, I had this very different experience. There I'm hearing government is responsive, and they're doing some very, very specific things there that people are saying lead them to feel supported as a business community.
Okay, that's fascinating. What exactly is Kent doing to make business owners feel so good?
They told me largely that they're feeling like the city has their back. I'll give you an example. I talked to this guy. His name's Joseph Kahono, and he's the owner of Rafiki. It's an East African restaurant there on First Avenue South in Kent. He was just ecstatic over this parklet that the city had come and built for him. I mean, we see these in Seattle too, but the city isn't building them for restaurants. It's a kind of deck built out of a long-lasting deck building material called Trex. And then on top of it, you've got a liquor control board height guardrail around it, and then a tent over it for the wintertime.
Especially when I saw that they use the Trex material that is long-lasting as compared to wood that will rust very quickly. I in my mind, I was like they are preparing for something that is permanent. I was very happy about them. That's a good extra money for us, for the city, and for everybody else. So we were very happy and excited that they had this plan.
And this structure that was built at the city's expense was the difference between a kind of bad year and a fairly good one in terms of feeling like he's going to survive. He felt really supported. He said this kind of investment means the city has our back.
That is extremely meaningful that the city would show up and build that structure for you to essentially help you stay in business.
Yeah, and they're not cheap. They're $12,000 a piece. And it's not just these parklets. Kent Downtown Partnership has a downtown festival called Kent Inside Out, where not just restaurants, but also shops that sell things can set out tables in the middle of the street. And people come to this as an event. I mean, this is the kind of thing that business owners in Seattle would like to see as well. More of this kind of thing to help draw people who aren't coming because those commuter jobs aren't happening right now.
And I'm curious about your thoughts, because you're right. We heard from Kelly in Seattle, who feels very unsupported, and then Joseph, who feels extremely supported by the city of Kent. What is the difference between these two places? What is it about Kent that enables this response, Joshua?
Well, one thing you have to keep in mind is it's a little less than a fifth the size of Seattle. But that's still pretty big. It's still a pretty big city. But Kent really took this targeted approach and built something that was highly visible. And there's many different ways that Seattle is trying to respond to the crisis too. I mean, Pamela Banks tells me that once they have permission to fully reopen, once the federal money comes in, and once enough people have been vaccinated, Seattle's response will be, transformative. It'll be like rebuilding after the Great Seattle Fire. But Seattle's not quite ready to do that yet. They want to make sure that they're not leaving anybody out, because obviously if you just start pumping a bunch of money into different programs, you're going to end up leaving people behind, maybe people who have traditionally, Black and brown communities that have not been able to participate in the city's wealth before. They want to avoid that. But that long listening process can also mean that in the short term, some businesses don't feel supported in Seattle.
Yes, I have heard the argument that we need to be far more strategic with the money that we're spending. Both of these cities, Seattle and Kent, are about to get a bunch of money from the American Rescue Plan. What do we know now about the impact that that plan might have for business owners like Kelly and Joseph?
I don't know what the numbers are for what Kent's going to get out of that, but I know Seattle is supposed to get something like $250 million from the American Rescue Plan. That money's going to allow Seattle to do more things kind of like Kent is doing. I don't know if Seattle will choose to build structures for restaurants specifically. They haven't signaled that so far. But, certainly the city of Seattle is going to be able to come up with more reasons for people to come downtown. They might have some kinds of outdoor concerts. You hear the word activation a lot, right? Seattle wants to activate spaces that don't have people in them.
Oh boy.
Will it work? Will it draw people in the numbers that businesses need? I mean, they got a long way to go if they want to offset the deficit of not having office workers there, not having cruise ship visitors there. They got a long way to go. So it remains to be seen if these sort of activation techniques will be enough.
And how are business owners like Kelly feeling about the future, Joshua? How is Kelly envisioning her future in downtown Seattle right now?
Kelly is a business owner who is actually questioning capitalism right now. She is so frustrated by the experience of bearing $200,000 in debt during this pandemic alone that she has questioned whether it's proper for her to be thinking about running a business by herself. Maybe she needs to be part of a collective. And she says, this is something she's always wanted to do. But the events of this summer and the financial hardship that she's sort of faced alone has caused her to think, maybe I need to be thinking about my business differently in a way that includes others who I can share both the profits with, but also the hardship in a time like this.
The pandemic has laid bare so many truths about who we are and maybe some revelations about who we want to be in the future.
Yeah. I mean, Kelly said that it took her business being boiled down to basically zero for her to seriously consider radical change.
KUOW's Joshua McNichols, really good to talk to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Trish.
Joshua is doing a series of stories profiling main streets in Seattle, Kent, and Tacoma. You can check it out on KUOW.org. Seattle Now is produced by Clare McGrane, Caroline Chamberlain Gomez, and Jason Pagano. Matt Jorgensen does our music. I'm Patricia Murphy. See you tomorrow.